So last month I did the video for the first book in the fiction book club that I began, and the first book was book number 1 for the Unicorn Chronicles, which is Into the Land of the Unicorns. I made a video for that one where I went over what I thought about it, and I also discussed several things that I marked along the way that I basically used to give a sort of philosophical discussion using the book. So what I'm going to do now, from now on, for all the other books and for the second one, which is also here, because this book has the first 2 books of this series, is divided into videos. Do one for my overview or my opinion about the book, a discussion about the book itself, not a review, a discussion of what I thought after reading the whole book, and then do a second video where I'm gonna do the philosophical discussion using that book. So the second video will use ideas from the book and ideas that I got while I was reading it, but it won't necessarily be about the book only. It will be using what I learned from the book, so you will be able to learn what I learned after reading this book. I think if you unite the 2 videos that I'm going to make and you read the same book that I read and that I read each month, because I'm going to pick one book for each month. For the first 4 months I already picked the 4 books of the Unicorn Chronicles. So then you will be able to enhance your experience of reading the book, because if you read it and you watch my 2 videos, one discussing the book itself, the characters, the plot, what I thought about it, and the other one discussing my ideas about it and what can we learn from this book. So I'm gonna teach you or talk about all the things that I learned from reading the book and from the ideas that I marked while I was reading it. So right now I'm gonna give you, for book 2, Song of the Wanderer, the first video, which is my discussion about the book itself, what I thought about the plot. Obviously, I will suppose that you already read the first book. Ideally, you should have read the second book as well. If you haven't read it, you can go read them and then come back to these videos, and you can even discuss it later on. It doesn't matter, because I already read it. So I can discuss it. It doesn't matter if it is months later, even 1 year later, because I already read the book, so I will remember. So basically this book club and these discussions are what I do for my reading list. So what I want to do with this is find a group of readers that also like the same things that I like reading. I'm very picky, so if you like good fiction stories, you're going to like what I'm choosing, what I'm reading. I always make sure that I read a good book that is going to be engaging and that won't disappoint me. So if you want to read good, engaging books that are not going to disappoint you with melodrama, a crappy ending at the end, who wants that? I don't want that. You can read the same books that I read, and you will be, pleased, because you will be reading good fiction stories. So that's my number one, the number one filter that I use to choose what I read is how good is this story going to be. I don't know, because I haven't read it, but I do my research and I take my time, and then I make sure that I pick what I think, what I feel is the best next book to read in the fun fiction book club, which should be ideally one of the top 25, top 30 fiction books in adventure, in fantasy, in fun fiction in general. Good reading, good stuff, which is gonna make you think. It's gonna teach you something. Don't think that because this is fiction and it could be fantasy or science fiction, it's just the story and it's not gonna teach you anything. If you feel that way, watch my videos and you're gonna learn something then. That's what I like, sharing my discussions and discussing, because I see that I don't just get the story, but I tend to learn other things when I read, because I notice the ideas that the author is using, and I read to learn. not just to get another story, but also to see what I can learn from it. So, okay, so let me just give you a quick tip. If you haven't begun and you want to read this, I recommend you get this book from Amazon. So the book is The Unicorn Chronicles, which is the name of the saga. But this book, which is named that way, has the first 2 books in one. And if you buy used, in good condition, it's like $10, so it's not that expensive, it's pretty cheap. So the first one, Into the Land of the Unicorns, was really short. It was, here you can see it, 160 pages. Just this, pretty short book. And it was good, it was good. Please, don't read the reviews on Amazon. They are good, I already read them, that's why I chose this saga. But if you read the reviews, they are going to spoil the plot twist. You don't want that. Please go into this spoiler free, so that in the first book, you don't know who the hunter is. You find out at the end, that's the way it's supposed to be. And in the second book, there's also a huge plot twist. I knew the one from the first book because I read all the reviews. But the one in the second book, I didn't know it. And it made the book, I'm not gonna say so much better, but it made it better for me. There's a big plot twist here in the second book, also towards the end, closer to the end, which when I reached that part, I thought, this is it. This is the best thing I read from the first 2 books. And since I'm reading them as if it was one book, it's the best thing in the whole book then. So here's Song of the Wanderer. The one I'm going to talk about now is much longer. That's book number 2. So that's 328, 29 pages. So it's much longer book. But it actually, I found the first book, it took me like 50 pages from the beginning to page 50 to finally begin to get into it. I didn't like the beginning, the intro from the first book that much. Maybe that is because I am a 20-something male and the protagonist is a young girl. So even if the story is good, there are things that obviously are not gonna reach me as much as they will reach, or with the same force as they will reach a younger girl, like someone who's 15 maybe. Someone like that may read the first book and they may love the beginning. I found the beginning not to my taste. I found it, not gonna say boring, but it didn't catch me, it didn't hook me with the story. It wasn't until page 50 that I realized that I finally was getting into it and liking it. For the second book, it was much better because it is a continuation. So when it begins at the very beginning, you already know the characters. Not all the characters are there, but you know the ones that begin it, the second book. So it doesn't take too long to get yourself into it because it is a continuation of what you left. That is a good thing about sequels. When sequels are very good and when they are done well and when they don't change all the characters and they continue with the same characters, you already know the characters. You know the backstory of what happened before. So you can get into it from the very beginning, and that was what happened with Song of the Wanderer. I liked the introduction in Song of the Wanderer much better, and I think it was because of that. I liked it much better. Okay, so let me show you what I'm gonna do with this. What I'm gonna do to discuss it. So I divided it in 2 parts. This right here, these that you see right there are the chapters for part 2 and what I will talk about right now in this video, which is the discussion of the plot of the characters in part 2, Song of the Wanderer. But what I did after that is for the other one, for the philosophical discussion I'm gonna do. So I marked some dialogues, some quotes, some ideas that they use in book 2, something that some of the characters say, and I realized that something can be learned from that. So I'm gonna mention all those ideas that I got, and I'm gonna not teach you, but tell you. I'm gonna tell you what I learned, and if you didn't notice it, you will be able to learn it as well. So then, right now I'm gonna focus on the story for book 2. So book 2, I had slightly high expectations for it because the first one was good, and I really wanted the second book to raise the bar. So I was expecting to see the bar being raised in terms of better plot, better characters, better everything, more, more enticing, more exciting, better story. I wanted something better than the first book. That's what I expect from a good sequel. That's what I want from a sequel. If the sequel is not at least as good as the one before, I don't like it as much. So I expect the sequel to be at least a little better, at least a tiny bit better, ideally much better. When that happens, that's a great sequel. That's a great story then. Especially if the first one was a good story, which is the case of this saga. So then the second book, even though I like the introduction, it took a long time for me to say, this can be better than the first one. I fell into way back, into maybe halfway through the book, maybe through here, halfway, through there. I felt that it was at the level of the first book. I wasn't sure that it was going to be able to actually surpass it. I thought, I was already thinking, oh no, this is gonna stay at the same level of the first book. It's not bad, it's good. But I wanted to get better than that, So it did get better than that, but it didn't do it until the last 1/3 of the second book. The last 1/3 of the second book is very, very good. On par with the best chapter of the first one, which I think it is a chapter when they meet the hunter and the dragon, and the plot twist chapter pretty much. So let me tell you which are the chapters. So I like the intro, the new meeting with the queen, the parts with the geomancer, Mecama. I don't know if I said that right or not, but it may be like that, Mecama, the geomancer. The chapters with the geomancer were really boring for me. There was a lot of description, a lot of describing. It wasn't bad, but it just, I just kept reading to get through that and see what will happen after that. That part didn't hook me at all. I found it a little boring. So the part with the Queen's players where they meet Jakes and Jakes joins them, that part was okay. Nothing special. The things began to get better when they got to the fight with the Delvers. So the fight with the Delvers, things got a little better at that point, some action. And not just the action, but new characters began to arrive in there to make it more interesting. Let's see. The story of the grandmother. They gave 2 parts of the story of her grandmother. The second part was better. The first part was good, which is the part where they also talk about Moonheart. It's good, but it was okay. It wasn't something that will be called a great chapter. I liked the part with the Griffin, the chapter with the Griffin. The Griffin is, I think if it's not the first, it's my second favorite character in the whole story. The Griffin is a pretty good character. It feels, even though it is fantasy, it feels realistic. It feels maybe a little funny, perhaps. And it was just likable. A likable character. A character that draws you into the story. So I really like the Griffin. Before they got to the Griffin, my favorite character in book 2 easily was Kara, the protagonist, and maybe also Finder. I like what they put there about the character. I wasn't liking Moonheart much, but Moonheart, got points for me later on after I found out his background story, and because what he does later. He definitely gained a karma. The character got more interesting later on, but at the beginning it felt like Moonheart was just there to add another unicorn to the group, basically. But it wasn't just that. Later on you see that he has a purpose there. Okay, so let me tell you first the chapters I like the most. chapters I like the most. I like the introduction. Eve's story was good, but it wasn't the best one. The Metaphil chapter, when they introduced the Griffin, I really like that character. So it's obviously a chapter that I liked. I think the two best chapters in the whole story for me were the one with the dragon, to bargain with the dragon, with Eveline, I think that's the name. Eveline, I don't know if I said it right now, Eveline. So that one was pretty good, the one with the dragon. And the one called Flicker Foot. The chapter when they reveal the story about this unicorn Flicker Foot, and they tell you a lot more there. That chapter was probably maybe the best one. It was in a tie. It was in a tie with To Bargain with the Dragon. Those two are the best chapters in the second book for me. The last chapter was also good because I really liked the ending of the second book. When you finish a big book like this, first book here and second book here, you finish the whole thing, and you really like the last chapter right here at the end and the way they finish things, and it gives you a sense of satisfaction. You're pleased. You know that you didn't waste your time reading this. You know that you enjoyed it and it gave you a good experience. And I think that's why I'm doing this basically book club and discussions based on my reading list, because